I appreciate the invitation to come out here. Tell me if you can't hear me. Julie, I can speak.
We can hear you.
I can talk plenty loud if you need me to. I have been told, so I'm going to express this to you now, that I'm generally not your regular stump speech. This is going to be more of a discussion, and we're going to talk a lot about the construct of the Constitution, the proper role of the U.S. Senate, why a common Texan who's just a dad would get off the couch and decide to get into this race, and what makes me think that I can make a difference. Really and truly, there's nothing special about me. I'm just a Texan. Now that's special. I'll give you that much. I'm born and raised Texan. I'm 48 years old. I've got 3 children. Been married 22 years to my high school sweetheart. I'm a member of the school board at Tarkington Independent School District. There's really nothing really sticks out there that makes me any different than anybody else. I own a couple of small businesses. We just work very, very hard, and we would like to keep what we earn. Everything you ever hear me say, everything, underline it with one founding principle, and this is my principle. I want to be free. I don't care about anything else. I want to be free. I want my children to be free. I want future generations of Texans to be free. That's the underlying motive for everything you see here standing in front of you. So, what would motivate an individual like me to decide that I can actually affect a difference or be in the race for a seat as large as the U.S. Senate? Well, about 6 or 7 years ago, I took on the arduous task of self-study and got into the framers and founders and the construct of the Constitution, what it actually created. Got tired of listening to sound bites off of every news media outlet you can think of, and decided to find out for myself. So, upon reviewing the source documents, it became very, very clear to me very early that as I learned more and more and more that what we have today is totally adverse to what we were gifted with by the framers. We don't live anything near like what we're supposed to be living in the construct of the Constitution. If at any time while I'm talking you have a question, raise your hand, because trust me, this is a discussion. You don't have to just listen to me. If you disagree with something I say, also raise your hand, because I love to hear that part, because I'm learning every day. I'm going to be a student for the rest of my life on this. I'm not a scholar. I know what I know. What I don't know, I want to learn. So what I found out is that the construct of the Constitution, it was designed in 3 primary principles. It was a republic based in federalism, republicanism, and limited government. The biggest question that I found out in the last 4 months of talking to about 4,000 people is, most of us, sadly, do not know the difference between federalism and nationalism. So don't worry if you don't, because it's actually probably a majority of Tea Party members, of liberty groups, that don't really understand the difference. Federalism is the most important principle of the 3 to me. Federalism means that all of the expansive powers reside with the states, with each of us in the states. We as Texans should manage the affairs of Texas. Cajuns should handle Louisiana, Okies should handle Oklahoma, and so on and so forth. The way this design was set up, that the states would have the expansive powers, except for those limited, delegated few powers that we gave to the general government. And everybody basically understands that. It's not what we have today. I think everybody can agree that the republic based in federalism has declined into a nation based in socialism. That's what we have today. Republicanism means you're going to be represented by those you elect. Generally speaking, you want those you elect most closely to you. If you read the Constitution, it has the original formula, which was 30,000 citizens per representative. That formula was specifically designed for one reason. You know the argument against term limits? We are the term limits. Okay, well, we're not the term limits. We were. When it was 30,000 to 1, or thereabouts, if we all got together in a community of 30,000 and we elected Joe Public to go represent us and he behaved poorly, we could all get on our wagon and go to his house and give him a piece of our mind. In a group of 30,000, there was actually a very good chance that you either knew Joe personally or you knew someone that knew him and you had some kind of an idea of their character. Well, today fast forward to today, we've got what, 716,000 representatives to the.
I thought it was like 740.
Is it 740 now?
Yeah.
So really, it's great for Jay Leno. I mean, he can go out on the street and do his, citizen on the street, who's your representative, and people just go, I don't know, Well, it's great for that, but sadly, it's terrible for us. So, if you've ever thought you shouldn't have term limits, I'm just telling you now, that's something you really ought to be pushing your congressman for. The last principle was limited government. Now, limited government's the easy one, and that's the one everybody should be just deeply in love with, because liberty and limited government can be interchangeable. Anywhere you see limited government, you got to think liberty, because there's one formula of history that has never ever been proven wrong, and it's unarguable. It's an argument you can't make against it, and that is that more government equals less liberty. The bigger the government, the less free the people are. That's a fact. It's been proven over and over and over again. What we have today is an extremely large government. Extremely large. So large that it is not in any way limited by the construct of the Constitution. I think everybody can basically agree that the federal government can do anything it wants at any time it wants. It's basically limitless. I mean, we can go so far as to say, if you were to compare it to the Constitution, which, by the way, the government is the Constitution. Does everybody understand that? States came together to create this Constitution. The Constitution created the government. So if the government doesn't follow the Constitution, what is it? Rogue? I mean, there's a lot of discussions you can have about the behavior of this government. During my personal study, and I'm not a lawyer, I didn't finish college. I was in my junior year at Texas State, was out of money, got a chance to go to work for Atlantic Richfield, and took it. It was either the best or worst thing that ever happened to me. I never got my indoctrination sheet. But the fact is, during my self-study, what I found out is the position of U.S. Senate. A U.S. Senate seat is the most abused, and most perverted position. That's the one that has been the most misused out of all of them. Reason being, people have been indoctrinated to believe that the role of a U.S. Senator is somehow to represent you. And I can literally go into a Tea Party meeting anywhere and I can say, who does the U.S. Senator represent? And half of the room will go, the people. And you go, oh, no. No, if you have a problem with what's going on in Washington, D.C., you have a representative. That's your congressman. The original intent, the original design of people like George Mason and Roger Sherman in Philadelphia when they were arguing about what they were going to do with the Senate. George Mason argued that, well, if you're going to have this three-branch government, and they're going to have checks and balances built in, then the states, who are the primary authorities of this new government, deserve a check as well. So George Mason called the Senate the mechanism of self-defense for the states. And that's exactly how they were designed. That's why a lot of people in here may not even know. The first 100+ years we were in existence, the state legislatures appointed their U.S. senators. They were not voted on by the public. So they had a very direct line of control in the Senate. The people's house is the people's house. The Senate was supposed to protect the states. The states had a way to throw a wrench in the program if the general government started behaving unconstitutionally or tyrannically or any other way. So everybody understand, or maybe some people understand, 1913 they passed the 17th Amendment. The 17th Amendment did away with the states appointing their U.S. senators, and it became popularly elected. Well, a number of things happened that year. Well, yeah, I'm not talking. Well, one of the worst years in our history. I mean, we got the income tax, we got the Fed, we lost the U.S. Senate position in the state. Oh Lord, they had the banking regulations. It was a terrible year, no doubt about it. But what the 17th Amendment specifically did, that a lot of people don't talk about, is that it jettisoned federalism. The idea that the states were independent and sovereign states. Everybody's read the Declaration. Yeah. We are independent and sovereign states, free and independent states. Exactly. So what happened with the 17th Amendment was they took the power away from the states. They made it public. They made the Senate role publicly elected. So what they did, and you will hardly ever hear anybody talk about this, it not only jettisoned federalism, and it immediately put us into nationalism. it also did away with the bicameral system. Now, the bicameral system is what the framers called the Congress. It was designed bicamerally. It had a lower house and an upper house, two houses. In my layman viewpoint, from my study, that went away because instead of having state-appointed officials to represent the states, now, immediately, we went to one general body of 535 people who are elected publicly by the popular vote. So really, all you have is one great big body, or you look at it, one small body, of 535 people who are popularly elected who just have different terms. So you wonder how they keep doing things that keep hurting the states and hurting the people. They act like they're arguing a lot. They generally kind of do the things they want to do, and they kind of scratch each other's back, and there's a lot of, back and forth, but generally the government continues to grow at our expense. That's why. If you were to look at the behavior of U.S. senators for the last 100 years, you would find out that if you were to graph it, almost without change, their behavior, their voting record, is to increase the debt, increase the size and scope of the federal, increase the power, unconstitutional power of the federal government, all at the expense of who? The states. So what you have is this behemoth national government. Now I'm going to give you my description of it. And people are going to go, oh, you're kidding me, Sit back and think about this. In my understanding of the federal government we have today, I look at it this way. We have one powerless parliament, made up of 535 people, elitists. We have one all-powerful king, and those two entities in our national government are protected by an army. And an army is 9 unelected, well-connected lawyers. They are protected by these lawyers who, had a friend of mine who is a scholar, by the way, gave me a cool statistic. He said, Dwayne, what percentage of the population of the United States has graduated from Harvard and Yale Law School? Astronomically low, 0.00000, and he said, right. He said, what percentage of the Supreme Court of the United States has graduated from Harvard and Yale Law School? I said 100%, and he goes, are you represented? I said, I never thought about it like that, but it's true. It's a definite brotherhood. Now, I think as of today, we talked about it being unlimited. I think you figured out real quick that the federal government can do anything it wants, and the Supreme Court is there for one reason, and that is to put their stamp of constitutionality on anything, whether it's constitutional or not, and to say, here you go, people, it's constitutional, move along. You must buy a good or service. It's constitutional, move along. We can grope you before you get on an airplane. It's constitutional, move along. We can tell you what speed you can drive on your freeway. We can tell you what your water pressure is going to be at your shower head. We can tell you that you can do whatever we tell you to, you will comply or we will jail you, regardless whether it meets those 18 enumerated powers pursuant to the Constitution. So, what I decided was that after 10 years of watching Senator Cornyn, I'm glad everybody's upset. I really am. But I'm one of those guys that's going to say, welcome to the party. You're a little late, but if you watch me for 10 years, this is the comparison I use. We all understand which party is known to be the party of expanding the government, raising the debt, creating revenue, and putting everybody they can on entitlements, taking care of the collective, these socialist policies. Which party is that? We all know. It's Democrats, right?
Both of them.
Well, theoretically, historically, that's what we've been taught.
Yep.
Democrats are supposed to be the party. So looking at Senator Cornyn specifically, if you were to look at his voting record for the last 10 years, if you wear a Republican t-shirt with a big bright R on the pocket, and you say, I'm conservative, but for a decade, you vote to increase the debt and expand the size and scope of the federal government.
Vote for the TARP. Vote for all the
Vote
bailouts.
for TARP, vote for bailouts, vote for NDAA, vote for Patriot Act, vote for FISA courts. Is he a Republican? Is he a conservative? Not even close. He's an imposter. So the issue is, if you're truly conservative, there's a root word in there. Conserve. Sooner or later, you got to conserve something. So the issue for me is, if you are a U.S. senator, you only have one priority. I mean, ultimately, above all the priorities you have, because they're a very limited job, by the way. You don't have to be a lawyer. Trust me. If you have an undying loyalty to Texas, and I do, if you understand that your role is to protect the best interests of this state, and I do for sure, then you can do this. If you have common sense, I suggest you get in the race. And I'm dead serious. I want everybody to go home from here today and go, he can do it, I can do it. Because it's true. The issue is this. The original construct was they were supposed to protect their individual states. When you look at anything that comes through that House, or that Senate, your responsibility to say, is it constitutionally approved by my state constitution, by the federal constitution, and in the end result, what is it going to have an impact? What kind of impact is it going to have on Texas? If you look at the behavior of our senators up until Ted Cruz, who's been doing an excellent job, it's been terrible. Absolutely adverse to Texas. You can't go into office, such as Senator Cornyn, and go in with a $6 trillion debt that when I was 38, we were all griping about $6 trillion. I'm 48 now, it's $17 trillion. You know what he just did in March? He just voted to increase it again. Just in March. That brings me to the catalyst of why I actually got in the race. In January, he gave a speech, or he gave an interview. And in the interview, he used the term that we hear 4 or 5 times a year. Oh, we might have to shut the government down. Remember that? And everybody that's at home goes, let's do that. Let's shut it down. Right, okay? Well, in the same week, he gave an interview with Houston Chronicle. And y'all can go home and Google this, Houston Chronicle and Cornyn. And in that interview with Houston Chronicle, the verbiage was perfect. It said, we will not default on our debt. We will raise the debt ceiling. I can tell you unequivocally, we will not default. So the way I explain that to everybody is, if this whole group of people in this room walked through that parking lot, and Senator Cornyn was standing right here, and he turned around and said, hey, everybody, we're not going to default. We'd all go, great, and we keep going. But if you translate what he said was, we're collapsing from under all this weight of debt that we've created all these years, but to keep from collapsing on my watch, we're going to create more debt, and we're going to push this off. So I can tell you unequivocally, we're going to create more debt, because I got to get mine, and I got to get out of here before this thing corrects itself. So if he said that, no one would just walk by. But that's the truth. The debt is the problem. And anybody that has a personal issue with a specific issue, anybody has a problem with a specific issue, I don't care what it is. This is the way I've lumped it all together. There's nothing at the federal level that's not controlled with what? Money. Take whatever issue you have. I don't care if it's military spending. I don't care if it's entitlements. I don't care if it's welfare of any kind. I don't care if it's unconstitutional agencies or programs. Put them all in one box, because it's real simple. You stop raising the debt, you immediately start to talk for a correction. Get the correction going the right way. Start the talk of divesting the power out of the federal back to the states where it should go. Get this alignment going back. When you get a handle on the debt, you get a handle on the spending, you immediately and necessarily get a handle on all your other issues. Because the only way they grow is by taking from us. That's it. And they take from us even when we say no, because they create debt. And when they create that debt, they put our children, our grandchildren, and us in chains of debt. We're in servitude. You should get to keep what you work for. End of story. I think that has a lot to do with freedom. You cannot possibly be free without property rights. You cannot possibly claim to have property rights if you rent your home from the government. if you can't see all of the money, your earnings that you make, because a portion of it leaves before you ever see it. Trust me, federal government would be that big if everybody had to write one check a year for their income tax.
Mm-hmm.
If you took home everything you earned, at the end of the year they sent you a bill, you know how fast they get whacked down the side? But they steal it before you get it. You are literally slaving your labor, and they're taking it before you ever get it.
What is it, 3 months? You work almost 3.5 months?
I break it down to the day. You spend about an hour and a half of every single day, maybe 2 hours, and you're working for them every single day. So, the proper role, does everybody understand what the authorities are of a U.S. Senator? The authorities. When you elect a U.S. Senator, what are you granting them the power to do? They have two. Back to the construct of the government. You have 3 branches. You understand, we were all taught in school, most of us were, that they're co-equal branches. That's a lie. That's an absolute lie. You have all the massive power of the general government is in the House. The House can declare war. The House has the power of the purse strings. The House can impeach anybody in the government. I mean, yes, sir.
Can the House impeach civil servants
Yeah.
without the approval of the President and the Senate?
Well, the Senate does all of the Senate takes up the impeachment. The Senate
Okay,
takes
but
up
the
the
House
impeachment.
can impeach.
Yes.
The House indicts the
The
Senate.
reason I'm
Right.
asking this
Right.
is Melissa, whatever her name is, in the IRS should have been impeached.
Absolutely.
And all of her-
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And Michael McCall needs to get off his ass and get it started.
Well, look at the list. Look at the list of impeachable offenses by so many members of our. I mean, seriously. I mean, if you could start the impeachment process, you just end up with a circular process of impeaching each other. I mean, there's so much unconstitutional
Well,
behavior
it's
going on.
corrupt as hell, I mean.
That's a fact. That's a fact. So they only have 2 authorities. When you elect them, they only have the power of advice and consent. That's it. I mean, the House is where all the power lies. And I'll talk about that a little bit about the Louis Gohmert issue that's going on right now. That's a knee-jerk reaction. Everybody's mad at Cornyn. Remember what I said? Thank y'all for coming to the party. Well, everybody's mad now. But his behavior is nothing new. It's exactly the same thing he's done for the last 10 years. We're just now paying attention to it because Cruz is giving us something to go off of. But the fact is, he's doing exactly what I expected. I'm not upset with it. I mean, I'm no more upset than I was 6 years ago.
You and Hutchinson were playing ball together.
You couldn't get anybody to talk about Cornyn 5 years ago because K. Bailey Hutchinson was in.
She was so much to the left.
Oh, much worse. Yeah, and I would love.
Yeah, she made him look good.
I would love to see the pollsters that took the poll that said he was the second most conservative.
Oh, I know.
Who took the poll? Oh my goodness.
goodness.
Anyway,
You
The-
couldn't
the-
say anything about Cornyn when Bush was president too, because, there were 2 peas in a pod there.
let me explain to y'all something. I'll say this publicly anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
George Bush was one of the worst presidents we ever had.
Yeah.
Do you know why? Do you know why?
Patriot Act.
Kept the doors wide open, expanded the social programs.
Yeah.
Those are all good reasons. Let me tell you why. You understand the construct of this government, you understand the power of the House.
They also signed the next step, the thing that came behind NAFTA.
The NDA, Patriot Act.
Patriot
All those
Act.
came off of his watch.
Yeah.
They're all
Patriot
designed.
Act is-
Yeah,
No. Look at it this way. Look at it this way. What's one of the worst abominations for a Supreme Court ruling in our lifetime? Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade took all state sovereignty and the ability to manage abortion in their states, and it nationalized it, and it became a right. It's a right. So, because of Roe v. Wade, today in the state of Texas, my state, we are arguing over whether or not we have a choice of birth control to murder a 20-week gestated baby. Well, the reason I could not stand the period of time George Bush was in office was because George had a special situation. He had a supermajority, and he had both houses for a number of years. He could have picked up the phone with a conservative House and Senate and said, we're going to legislate away from Roe v. Wade. We're going to tell them that it's unconstitutional. They have no power to rule in that area. And we're going to send it back to the states. And he could have done it like that. And he never did.
Just have to make it like it is conception automatically.
Between you and me, it's none of the business. If Texans take care of Texas. If we want to make it at conception, and it is, then we're going to make it that. If the people in Connecticut want to make it no, then the people that don't disagree with it need to move here. And if you live here and you agree with that, you need to go there. That's called federalism.
A competitive environment.
That's called
States compete
federalism.
to
That's
create
absolutely
a
right.
state to live in.
So, back to your U.S. Senate seat, they only have the power of advice and consent. The House carries the majority of the power. So really all they can do is concur or make proposals to whatever comes out of the House. They're not supposed to create revenue. They're not supposed to get into these arguments. And I actually have arguments out of the congressional record from as early as like an 1832 tariff, where they're literally having a discussion in the Congress and saying, well, we're going to make an amendment to this tariff that's going to lower revenue. So it shouldn't affect us. We should be able to do that. And they argued for 2 days that it says revenue. It doesn't say raising revenue or lowering revenue. It's just revenue. We don't have that power. If this is going to happen, it's got to happen in the House. So you can see the clarity of mind that they had in that first century after we had the Constitution. What we have today is the Constitution doesn't count. We can do whatever we want. What we've got to get to is we've got to get to somebody who actually understands the role of the Senate. Do I think we're going to repeal the 17th Amendment? Boy, that'd be great. That'd be great. I just don't see that happening immediately. What I tell everybody is, you vote for somebody like me, you've basically given your 2 cents worth to repeal it because you get somebody that's going to do the position as it was originally designed. It's a tough one because the Senate is majority Democrat, but the discussion is not tough. The discussion of federalism, the discussion of pushing back against nationalism. Let me tell you something, this is personal. This is my personal belief, and I believe this with all my heart. I think federalism would fix almost everything we have today. Do you know that if you could get the discourse back to federalism, and you could get the people on the left, the people on the right, the far left, socialists, pick them. If you could get them all in the same room and say, here, this is what federalism is, and explain it to them, and get everybody to kind of bring their minds back around. The pundits wouldn't have a job. MSNBC, Fox, all that would go away. This 24-hour news cycle. Because if we truly understood federalism, then the left could live where the left, they could assemble together. Conservatives could assemble together. Traditional values could be maintained in your area. And then you would have a choice. So you get down to a point where it's like, I'll use this as a good example, DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act. Tea Party groups, liberty groups, doesn't matter who they are, liberty groups are split. You got some that are arguing for it, some that are against it. What I'm telling you is the federal government has no business in it. So as a Tea Party member, most of us years ago would have been, well, even some of us today, would have been very supportive of the Supreme Court ruling in favor of traditional marriage. But I try to back everybody up and say, hey, look, we're in Texas, we have a constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. We were supposed to be a free and sovereign independent state. If you look in our Constitution already addresses that. It already addresses it. If you want to argue over a new amendment in Texas to change the definition of one man, one woman, then that's a different discussion altogether, but we're going to have it. Not the people in Maine, not the people in California. It's none of their business. Our Constitution is ours. It's none of the business of federal government. So what you end up getting is, and I want everybody to wrap your brain around this, as Tea Party members, when we clap because they don't rule on DOMA or they do rule on DOMA, we are giving them sanction to rule on donors in an area they have no power to be. So the argument needs to constantly be, they shouldn't be involved in it. The state should have the power to do what they want. If the people in Connecticut, as they do, are constantly voting for socialized something or same-sex marriage or whatever they want to vote for, fine.
Let them.
That's fine. But what has happened is that we have helped. All of us in this room have helped. We have nationalized so much of our government that instead of us being able to live in a neighborly, we'll care about you, we don't really agree with you, but I'm not going to come live over there, but we'll do business with you or whatever, that relationship. Think about what we have today. We have national viewpoints. So the left has this death grip on the right's neck. And the right's got a death grip on the left's neck. And what we're fighting over is what Locke called the gun, which is the power of government. Really and truly, we would not be fighting like we do today if we had federalism. We had nationalism. So we argue, and all we fight over is getting enough of our people in to control that force. Because if we can get control of that government, boy, we can force you to live like we want. That's not what you want. I don't want to enslave anybody. If they disagree with me, I don't need to hang out with you, but I don't want to put you in front of a gun. But the thing is, we argue over the power of this national government, and it's totally undermined the relationship we're supposed to have with the government. The federalism and the basis of that has been destroyed, and a lot of that goes to the fact that you do not have anyone that stands. I'm saying Ted Cruz is doing a fine job. There's some language I would like to hear from Ted Cruz I don't hear yet, but I think I'm going to get a chance to meet him in another week, and I'm going to bring up a few things and see what he says. But I trust he's pretty much going to be on the same page. But there's some language I'd like to hear, and I'd like to see senators start speaking from the vantage point of my state. When they stick a microphone in their face and say California's doing X, Y, and Z, they want to pass legislation that does this nationally. I want to see somebody who says, wait a minute, in Texas, we got that covered. Whatever they're doing in California, knock yourselves out. They fall over. Because that's the construct. That's how it's supposed to work. We're not supposed to have an impact. We're not supposed to take our beliefs as Texans and impose them on people in Maine or Montana or wherever, and vice versa. So to me, it's very, very clear. The senator's role is so, I don't want to say it's simple. There's a lot of responsibility with it, but
The guiding rule is not that hard.
the rules are pretty streamlined. I mean, bless their hearts, the ones in the House have a lot more to deal with legislatively. But the Senate, really, their most important role to me is the advice and consent on presidential appointments. Like, I don't know, judges. And we've been so good at that, haven't we? Holy cow. So, my personal self-study led me to a point where I just thought, I'll tell everybody I've got Jeffersonian principles. I accept the Constitution as it was written and amended. I'm basically telling you that most of the 20th century Supreme Court rulings were adverse to the Constitution and did it harm. And I will argue that with any attorney that wants to talk, and they generally speaking, the legal profession, who are very learned in case law, believe that the Supreme Court's the final arbiter of everything all the time, everywhere, and I wholeheartedly disagree. Yes, sir.
Congress can pass new laws to overrule the Supreme Court, and they're not doing it.
Sure they can.
They can correct their problems.
Let me tell you, this is just the big picture. This doesn't really have anything to do with the U.S. Senate. I'm just going to throw this out there and put it out there for y'all to ponder. Do you ever wonder how it is? Have you ever thought, how is it possible that an unelected bureaucrat in a cubicle somewhere in D.C. can take out a piece of paper and write down something, hand it to his boss, who works for us in an unelected position. They can stamp their approval on it, put it in a manual, and someone can come to your house with a gun and put it to your head and say, you will comply, or I will put you in jail or worse.
Totally unconstitutional.
1947, the Administrative Procedural Act. Congress passed it to make things a little smoother, make it easier on them. Allow the agencies, because it was growing so fast. They had so many representatives out there working for all these agencies, they just couldn't take time for Congress, who's supposed to have the power to pass the laws. They said that you could write your own procedures and regulations. Well, what's another word for regulation? Law. So what do we have? The vast majority of the laws that you and I are being threatened with force every single day are not passed in front of Congress. They're absolutely not. So what we have is we have a Congress that's a shell, and we see what they argue over. But behind the scenes, you have people writing laws and regulations that impact us every single day that never see the light of the Congressional Hall. They just implement them. You ever wonder how the EPA can come to Texas and tell the TCEQ that they disagree with what they're doing, and the TCEQ can say, well, these are the procedures we have, and they'll say, well, you're going to follow our procedures, and they're going to say, well, we disagree with it, and you know what they do? They just skip the TCEQ and they go straight to the office of the company that they're dealing with, and they say, you will comply, or you're going to face a daily fine. Does Texas have control of that? They could, but they don't.
Sure.
Well, I'm one of those guys, you would hear such language that you've never heard before. I would be advocating for my state legislatures to write resolves and resolutions and enact things that no one has ever heard of. I would sound like, I have no doubt that if I were blessed or cursed, I don't know how you look at it, to get elected, that I would immediately take every single bit of stress off of Ted Cruz in a nanosecond. When you advocate that your state legislature write a resolve that says Obamacare is unconstitutional, we all know it to be unconstitutional, regardless of any unconstitutional ruling by the Supreme Court, and that we will not participate, we will not enact it, and we will not be a part of it in any way, shape, or manner, which sounds good, right? But what if you did the way the framers designed it? What if you added a little caveat to that, and you said that anyone caught giving information, assistance, aid of any kind to the federal government in any way of litigation will go to jail? Because not only are we not going to participate, we're not going to get your kangaroo system and go through the court system just waiting for you to say we're wrong. We're not participating. Now that's serious. That's a little different. You say, yeah, the Affordable Care Act says that you're going to put a lien on their bank account if they don't join. They're going to put a lien on your home if you don't join Obamacare. Well, in Texas, you're not going to do that. And you can sue all you want, but that suit's going to stop the Red River because we're not going to participate. That's how you deal with this. That's why I was so upset with all the gun lobby that went on this last session, because there were so many bills that came out, and they're supposed to be so strong. Boy, gun rights, gun rights, gun rights. Well, guess what? I heard an interview with two of the sponsors of two of those bills, and they said, what do you do if it goes to the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court rules against you. What'd they say? Well,
there you go.
We'll wait for the
then it's unconstitutional.
Stop your job to interpret.
Sorry, that's not how it works.
They wait for the ruling. Well, we're just gonna wait for the ruling. I've been told that a lot.
I got
Wait
into
for the ruling.
Well, you know what? And I get it. I get upset with a lot of that because a lot of the big fluff out there is, well, we sued the government on your behalf. Throwing stuff against the wall and saying, we sued them for this and we sued them for that. Yeah, well, they're here taking my stuff. So how's that lawsuit going? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that all sounds good, but what are you actually doing? I actually got into a deep discussion with some representatives of the 10th Amendment Center, and I'm a big supporter of the 10th Amendment Center. I was hounding a couple of the gun rights bills this past session, and they were getting all over me. The 10th Amendment guys were getting all over me. These are good bills. They're good bills. And I was going, no, they're not. They don't say what they need to say. Well, what do you expect? I said, I expect them to say, and this might, some people may understand this, some people may not. I expect it to say Texas does not recognize the incorporation doctrine. Texas does not recognize the authority of the federal government to infringe in any way, shape, or form. That we will not comply That the federal government, it is none of their business. The Bill of Rights is a restriction on the federal only. If you don't believe it, read the preamble to the Bill of Rights. We have a Bill of Rights in Texas. Remember? Why does there 50 different states with 50 different constitutions and 50 different bills of rights if we're all going to be relegated to one supposed limited constitution and bill of rights? That's nationalized. Remember? So let's just throw our constitution away in Texas? No. How about let's start talking about federalism again? Let's start getting back to people who are going to represent Texas. Now I'm going to tell y'all one other thing. When you are discussing the role of U.S. Senator and you're discussing that election, tell everybody you know, you've got to change the mentality. When you're voting on a U.S. Senator, you are voting on that extra legislator. You're not voting on somebody that's going away from you and they're going to be in Washington, D.C. and they represent the federal government. You elect your state representative, you elect your state senator, and then you elect your U.S. Senator. That's your extra legislator. Now they may house in the belly of the beast, but they better answer to the state legislature of Texas. And I tell everybody, what would you do if I got elected and I shut down all those 8 offices that do nothing but spend money for our tax money to stay open for corner? What if I just called the governor of Texas and said, find me a closet in the state capitol with a phone jack and give me an office? Because here's how it actually works. The way it actually works is if you have a problem with what's going on with the Congress, you call your congressman. If it gets out of the Congress and you still have a problem, you call your state representative. There should be 150 people who can immediately get a hold of that U.S. Senator and say, man, I am getting a lot of negative feedback or a lot of positive feedback. This is what we need to work on. Think about the dynamic. We've got 26 million people in the state of Texas. If you have, I don't know, 3 million of them that are trying to get word through to the 2 U.S. senators, what are they getting? Nothing. Who's going to get mad at who? If I were in the office, I'd be the one they were all mad at because, I'm not getting back to that 2,400,000th email. Fact is, if you follow federalism, you understand you can call your state representative, and that's only a pool of 150 people. There should be an easy email list for a U.S. Senator that says he can get contact and get advice and counsel from his own state representatives, just like that. I was at the Defend the Constitution forum in Fort Worth last weekend, and I was standing next to a guy who's a bright young attorney, and he was speaking on the Second Amendment, and he and I didn't necessarily agree on the Second Amendment. And he said, after I spoke, he said, I want you to know I still disagree with you on the Second Amendment. And I said, I know that. And he said, but I'm going to tell you, I'm going to vote for you. I said, well, I appreciate that. I said, what you really need to understand is that if I need counsel as a U.S. Senator, I will get it from you in the House in Texas. I won't get it from anybody in D.C. They do not represent my interests. So I don't know if I covered all the bases, but basically that's why I'm here. The construct of the position is to me, it's not that hard if you can just follow suit and understand the proper role of government the way